Hi, and welcome from Claudia, Sky, and Andrea to our presentation on Action Research Design. Please review part 1 of our video that introduces the design, outlines the process of conducting action research, and addresses issues of reliability, validity, and rigor. Once complete, continue on to part 2, and then once you have finished viewing the videos, please read the article and utilize the evaluation guidelines provided to critique the article. Then take a moment to review our critique. Finally, join us on Moodle for a discussion about the design and the article that you've just read. For this part of the presentation, we will be reviewing what is action research. We will briefly compare traditional education research and action research. We will address who uses the design and when it is used. We will also briefly explain the two types of action research, participatory and practical. Next, we'll review the process of the design, and finally we will discuss issues of validity, reliability, and rigor. What is action research? According to Mills, action research is defined as systematic procedures done by teachers to gather information about and subsequently improve the way their particular educational setting operates, their teaching, and their student learning. Carr and Kemmis define action research as self-reflective inquiry undertaken by participants in social situations in order to improve the rationality and justice in their own practice. So, research done by you to improve your own practice. Up until this point, we have reviewed various qualitative and quantitative research designs. These educational research designs are usually used by researchers who are removed from the environment they are studying and are not often personally involved. According to Mertler, teachers and schools have been criticized by the public and government sources for various issues, such as low level of student achievement and not preparing students for the workforce. So as we have seen from the definition of action research, it is teachers, administrators, counselors, and/or school-based teams of educational professionals, as well as political leaders that use this research design. Henning, Stone, and Kelly suggest the purpose of action research is to solve a problem here and now in a local setting. So considering the teacher is looking to solve a problem here and now in their classroom, it is important for the teacher to develop a research persona. The regular teaching persona requires a teacher to deal with multiple situations in rapid succession or simultaneously, such as classroom management, motivation, student learning, and assessment. The key is that while wearing the teacher persona, it matters little how you arrive at solutions, but it is most important that they work, and work fast. While wearing your research persona during action research, the teacher must learn to isolate specific elements of their teaching, make specific, deliberate alterations in their instruction, collect data to evaluate their newest strategy, and carefully analyze the data collected. Next, when is it used? We use this design when we have an educational problem to solve. A teacher might use it in their classroom to improve student learning in their own practice, and it might be used by school teams to address common issues. So this design may have been appropriate for Maria from our textbook reading and her issue on violence in school. Creswell provides 3 example studies that depict the kinds of questions that can be addressed by action research. First, Dodds examined whether problem-based learning is superior to the traditional lectures. Second, Soprano and Guerin looked at how literacy in writing emerges for first grade students. Third, Waters and others assessed the difficulties faced by part-time faculty. Here are 3 additional questions that have been addressed by this type of design. First, what are the attributes that hinder synchronous learning in distributed learning environments? What role does visuality play in critical thinking? We will be discussing this question further in our critique of this article and discussion on Moodle. And last, how to fairly assess a group of students with whom did not share a common first language or common culture. There are 2 types of action research. First, practical action research addresses a specific school situation with a view toward improving practice. Some examples of practical action research are An elementary teacher studies the disruptive behavior of a child in her classroom. A team composed of students, teachers, and parents studies the results of implementing a new math program in junior high. And a college instructor studies his professional development using technology in teaching. These examples of practical action research all aim to improve specific local issues for a teacher, school-based team, or college instructor. According to Creswell, participatory action research has a social and community orientation and an emphasis on research that contributes to emancipation or change in our society. The following are possible problems that could be addressed by participatory action research. Tests that label and stereotype students. Tests that omit important historical persons or events of cultural and ethnic groups. Assessments that serve to confirm student failure rather than student learning. And K-12 classroom interactions that silence or quiet the voices of minority students. The purpose of participatory action research is to improve quality of people's organizations, communities, and family lives, and it addresses social problems that constrain and repress the lives of students and educators. At this point, we will review the stages of action research and the steps involved during each stage. The diagram you are looking at now is from Mertler, which groups the steps into stages, simplifying this process. Looking at the diagram, first the planning stage, where the researcher completes 4 steps before the implementation of the project. These steps include identifying and limiting the topic, gathering information, reviewing related literature, developing an action plan. Next, the researcher moves to the acting stage, where the research plan is implemented and data is collected and analyzed. Moving to the developing stage, the researcher has analyzed the data and is ready to make revisions, changes, or improvements to the original research plan. This is known as the action plan. Finally, the reflecting stage. The researcher summarizes the results of the study, creates a strategy for sharing the results, and reflects on the entire process. This diagram from Mertler depicts the cyclical nature of action research. This design has a clear beginning, but does not necessarily have a clear endpoint. As you can see, a teacher may complete an action research project, Cycle 1, during a term and decide to use her new, revised plan of action during the second term, completing Cycle 2. This process could continue over and over as the teacher refines her action plan and teaching method. Although we have discussed that action research has a clear beginning with the development of the research topic in question, many teachers may come to decide on their topic question after collecting and analyzing classroom data. For example, a grade 1 teacher may notice her students have low scores on reading assignments, and she may decide to investigate why scores are low and develop an action plan to address the problem. Action research is dynamic, flexible, and cyclical. Once a teacher or educational professional has decided action research is the correct design to help address their problem, they will need to decide exactly what to study. 3 questions a teacher could ask themselves when deciding what to study are: what do you desire to make better? What specific practice would you like to improve? And what is not working as well as it should in your professional teaching or the learning environment? After a topic is identified, it is important to limit it to ensure the research study is manageable for the teacher. One should consider time requirements and restrictions, the data collection levels of those conducting the research, and budgetary limitations. Step 2. Reviewing related literature. During this step, the researcher reads any information from existing sources that may shed light on their topic. Sources could include professional books, research journals, websites, teacher resource manuals, school district documents, discussions with colleagues. This step provides opportunity for the researcher to connect existing theory and research in actual classroom practice. Step 3. Developing a research plan. During this stage, the researcher takes the research problem and develops it into a research question. This question will guide the structure of the study. Further, a hypothesis may develop from the research question. Next, variables should be identified. As we know, variables are characteristics or behaviors which data will be collected. Finally, the researcher needs to identify the procedures used to collect the data. The researcher would need to answer the following questions. Who can provide the data needed? How many participants are needed? And how do I gain access to these individuals? Next, when developing a research plan, the researcher would select a method for conducting their research. A few examples of possible methodologies are surveys, comparative studies, correlational studies, experiments, observations, interviews, analysis of existing records, and ethnographies. These methodologies are often used within action research in a simplified and less sophisticated form due to the applied focus of this design and because of who is conducting the research. Finally, during this step, the researcher must consider the issue of research ethics. The ethical issues of this design will be discussed further during part 2 of our video presentation. Step 4. Implementing the plan and collecting data. During this stage, the researcher must decide which data collection instruments will be used and begin implementation. Mertler outlines 4 data collection techniques often used in action research. 1. Observation. You may observe participants in the educational process. This could be teachers, students, and administrators. You would record using field notes or a journal. And to ensure rigor, it is important to have more than one observer to ensure data collected is consistent between observers. 2. You could use interviews, questionnaires, and surveys. They may be oral questions and answer between individuals or in the form of written questionnaire or survey. Once interviews are complete, the researcher may use member checking to ensure the data collected is indeed what the participant was trying to communicate. Next, you could use existing documents or records. You may review attendance records, minutes from faculty meetings, lesson plans, or policy manuals. The action researcher needs to make sense of data that already exists. Finally, the use of checklists, rating scales, and tests. These instruments could be selected specifically to yield data for the study at hand. When selecting instruments, it is important to review the reliability. When using testing, it is important to establish a baseline and use a test-retest format to ensure results are valid. In action research, it is important to collect data through a wide variety of techniques to allow for triangulation. This process would increase validity, reliability, and rigor. During step 5, the researcher will be analyzing the data. The type of data analysis completed will depend on the type of data, either qualitative or quantitative, or both. For qualitative analysis, an inductive process will likely be used looking for patterns and similarities in the data. For quantitative analysis, one often uses descriptive statistics, but inferential statistics are required when comparing groups or when measuring relationships between variables. The analysis of data may be very daunting for a teacher researcher. It is helpful to enlist support from other teachers, administrators, and outside data analysts to help with the process and to ensure validity, reliability, and rigor. During step 6, the researcher develops an action plan. The main goal of this design is to create an action plan, which is a proposed strategy for implementing the results of the study. The action plan is consistently being monitored, evaluated, and revised throughout the research process. This process perpetuates the cyclical nature of action research. Step 7. Sharing and communicating results. Sharing results from action research can simply occur between colleagues, in a conversation, or through a presentation at a staff meeting. The researcher may consider the addition of a written summary if addressing the school board, principal, students, or parents. On a more professional level, results can be shared at conferences or through academic and professional journals. These mediums would require a more formal written paper of the study and the results. Finally, step 8, reflecting on the process. The researcher would reflect at the end of the design cycle. They would review what has been done, determine its effectiveness, and make decisions about possible revisions for future implementations for the project. It is important to understand that reflection is also important throughout the process. It allows for the researcher to monitor the process of the project and make decisions and revisions throughout the process of implementation. Creswell briefly outlines issues with action research that could directly affect its validity, reliability, and rigor. Some view action research as an informal process of research, conducted by teachers and other educators who are not formal academic researchers. It's a form of inquiry that uses a less than scientific approach, and the results are often reported in online journals, not scholarly journals. Methods are also adapted and changed in response to practitioners' objectives to understand a practical problem. When considering the validity, reliability, and rigor of action research, it is important for us to return to the purpose of the design, to gather information about and subsequently improve the ways their particular educational setting operates, their teaching, and their student learning. How important is validity, reliability, and rigor in an action research study if the researcher has managed to improve the educational setting, their teaching, or the student learning? That being said, teachers can still increase the validity, reliability, and rigor in their research. They can do so by using reliable instruments during data collection, establishing a baseline measure for comparison, using 2 observers instead of 1, involving outside personnel for data analysis, allowing for triangulation by using more than one method of data collection, and when using interviews to collect data, allow for member checking to ensure accurate data. This concludes part 1 of our video. Please continue on now to part 2.